Welcome to No Scrub Scrub Club, NSSC. A little TLC inspired, a little medicine inspired, and a whole lot of inspiration from dope people doing dope things.
I wanted to ask you about kind of your career a little bit because Fred and I are very passionate about encouraging younger people, the next generation of particularly minority individuals, Black individuals, to work hard, to keep trying. Like I know, like the professional realm now is kind of like less, less viral than maybe being like a YouTube guru or being an
Right.
IG. So can you talk a little bit about your career? Like if someone, let's say, was in middle school or high school and was like, wow, Kevin looks very successful. How can I get where Kevin is going and what exactly does he do? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay. Um, so my career has been, uh, for me, I would summarize it as the old advice and adage of know thyself. And what I mean by know thyself is I've always had this disposition to, when people say, I love helping others, right? I've had that, but I always challenge myself to say, well, people need help doing a multiplicity of things. People need help with getting their garbage out. People need help with getting their food delivered. People need help with their health. Um, from the most sort of minute but important thing to the biggest thing. And for me, the value of education and the transformative power of education um, is true to who I am and what I've learned. Um, and I've gained a lot personally and professionally from appreciating and investing in education. So I would start there. The importance of education has been salient in my journey. And through each of my roles that I've had, whether it was working to uh, working at the medical center to design jobs for inner city teens. For me, one important aspect of that program was the graduation rate and the college enrollment rate. And again, this is not, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, man, this individual really appreciates education and it seems like education is the only, no, I fundamentally understand that college is not for everyone. And I'm speaking about education here in the structured form and the multiple ways in which you can invest in educating yourself. And I learned that from the teens that I worked with, because the graduation rate from high school was 100%, and the enrollment rate was 88% to post-secondary education. But what I learned and I saw from students was they had different passions, of course. And although some didn't enroll in college, uh, some of the most successful students took other paths: the Navy, the Army, trade school, starting their own business, investing in singing. And those individuals have been met with tremendous success. So just knowing the value of investing in the learning process, that's been one thing that's been core to my career journey. Now, I would also advise knowing what you're good at doing. So what I was always good at doing was innovating in the space of formal education. So colleges and universities and K through 12 as well. And when I say innovating, meaning I have historically been good at, you have an issue around getting students access to a certain service. You have an issue where students are perhaps the educational system or institution isn't structured in a way that provides optimal access and optimal support for students to advance. And by advance, meaning towards graduation, credit accumulation. I see myself as sort of a higher ed engineer. So if there's an issue with an educational system, um, I have been, and I say this with great humility, I have been successful with looking at that system, taking research and best practices and saying, well, how can I take this research and this best practice to apply it to this situation? And oftentimes, how can I learn from the students and learn from the individuals who are in the system to create a best practice that works for them? So that's what I do for a living currently, and I enjoy it. And I enjoyed specifically working with students who are first gen, students who come from households with limited income, um, optimizing educational pathways that allow for those students to head towards their rendition of what success means for them, whether it be personal or professional. So that's a very roundabout and probably extensive way of sharing, what I do. But the advice that I would give to students is self-awareness. You have to know what gets you going. For the two of you, I'm pretty sure there was a moment where you fundamentally remembered and recognized medicine. And I enjoy this aspect of medicine. And similarly, education is an expansive field, but I enjoy this aspect of education, using research, working on students who, working on the system, not necessarily the students, working on the system that allows for greater access, that allows for greater support, that by extension positively impacts student outcomes.
Yeah, that's it's definitely interesting because like the way I came about thinking about going through psychiatry, that kind of reminds me of this concept. It's a Japanese concept called Ikigai, and
Yeah.
we definitely talked about that. But it was, what does the world need? What are you passionate about?
Right.
What can you get paid for? And what are you good at? And then all the summation was looking at like, oh, this is my reason for being. And I had to go through that thought process through clinical rotations third year to come to the point where it's like, okay, like psychiatry is my Ikigai. And
right. Yeah, we've definitely had that conversation about that concept. And without even mentioning it, I was sort of towing the line between explaining. So I think that's a very concise way. Thank you, Fred. That's a very concise way of explaining what I would impart to anyone that looks at what I'm doing and say, you know what, that has value. How did you do that?
Ikigai, I love that, Fred.
Yeah.
I need to look into that because
there's
I'm not gonna lie, like sometimes being in medical school, just being in the system in general, you're just like, why am I doing this? Like, I don't have to be here. But I think if I look at that and like actually understand, come to an understanding, it would help me. So yeah.
Oh yeah. And there's definitely been like tough points where it's like, I have to get through this exam. I have to like set up this appointment for these people. I had to see this many patients in a day. But then at the end of the day, you're just like, okay, what is my reason for doing this?
Right.
And the thing is, like, if you're able to kind of question that for yourself, that might help you kind of steer your direction into be like, oh, maybe this is not actually for me. Similar to it's like, okay, maybe college isn't for me, or maybe going to a trade isn't for me. And it's just helping you narrow down like your own life direction.